3.5 years, that's how long the Russia-Ukraine war has raged. And in that time, the world as we know it has completely changed. We've all seen the headlines about the Israel-Gaza conflict, the war between Israel and Iran, the India-Pakistan conflict, and other major events. Social media has made sure we're all aware of the breaking news, and many of us have tried to make sense of the details. But what if we could look at these events from a totally different angle? What if we saw the world's power players as pieces on a chessboard? That's exactly what we're going to do. We're launching a new video series that breaks down global conflicts like a game of chess, where we witness the moves, the strategy, and the current state of play. Since we're translating real-life war events to the chessboard, this requires adapting complex narratives to the rigid rules of the game. A perfect replication of every move is not possible. Therefore, we ask for your forbearance regarding any expected imperfections. Today, we're kicking things off with the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's set up the pieces and watch the board unfold. Before the first shot was fired, the pieces were already moving. Ukraine opened with pawn to d4, asserting its sovereignty, strengthening governance, and maintaining steady diplomacy and defense. Russia responded with a pawn to d5, mirroring Ukraine's stance while preparing strategic maneuvers at the border. Ukraine advanced pawn to c4, signaling a pivot toward Western alignment by opening diplomatic and economic fronts, directly challenging Moscow's influence. Russia pushed pawn to e6, adopting a containment strategy while closely monitoring developments. Ukraine developed its knight to c3, reinforcing internal defenses and military readiness. Russia brought out its knight to f6, signaling a troop buildup and heightened tensions. Ukraine moved its knight to f3, stabilizing its command structure. Russia advanced pawn to c5, escalating military posturing by massing forces along Ukraine's borders in late 2021. Ukraine captured the pawn on d5 with its c4 pawn, countering early skirmishes with Russian-backed separatists in Donbass and highlighting Russian aggression in reference to the Minsk agreements. Russia recaptured the pawn on d5 with its e6 pawn, rejecting compromise and hardening its stance, making confrontation inevitable. And then in February 2022, the board exploded into chaos. Ukraine developed its bishop to g5, warning openly of Russia's looming threat and strengthening NATO ties. On February 24, 2022, Russia pushed pawn to c4. The full-scale invasion had begun. Ukraine advanced pawn to e3, fortifying defenses and forming layered barricades. Russia deployed its bishop to b4, thrusting toward Kiev and attempting to pin Ukraine's response. Ukraine checked the Russian king with its queen on a4, halting the blitz and forcing Russia to slow down. Russia blocked with its knight on c6, committing additional forces. The three-day conquest plan was already collapsing. Ukraine moved its knight to e5, counterattacking around Kharkiv with Western anti-tank weapons. Russia captured the knight on c3 with its bishop, devastating Mariupol in the process. Ukraine recaptured the bishop with its pawn on c3, holding firm under pressure. Russia brought its queen to d6, shifting focus toward Donbass after retreating from Kiev. The Russian opening gambit fails. Kiev stands. The war enters a brutal new phase. The blitzkrieg failed. Now, the war turns into a grind. The war slowed, but the cost only grew. Ukraine advanced pawn to f3, strengthening logistics and sustaining the fight. Russia castled kingside, preparing for a long war. Ukraine developed its bishop to e2, repositioning forces across Donbass and southern fronts. Russia captured the knight on e5 with its knight, seizing Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. Ukraine recaptured on e5 with its d-pawn, holding defensive lines west of the Siversky Donets River. Russia captured the pawn on e5 with its queen, consolidating Luhansk gains. Ukraine shifted its queen to b4, preparing precision strikes ahead of the Kherson offensive. Russia pushed pawn to a5, overstretching while annexing 4 Ukrainian oblasts in September 2022. Ukraine moved its queen to c5, launching HIMARS strikes that crippled Russian logistics. Russia captured the bishop on g5 with its queen, retaliating with massive missile and drone strikes on energy infrastructure. Ukraine moved its king to f2, fortifying civilian and energy systems ahead of winter. Russia placed its rook on e8, weaponizing oil and gas supplies to pressure Europe. Both sides bleed, but neither breaks. Winter arrives, cold, dark, and deadly. Both kings are still standing. Ukraine activated its rook on b1, advancing along the Kherson axis and retaking the strategic city in November 2022. Russia moved its queen to f5, clinging on militarily and diplomatically after Kherson's fall. Ukraine centralized its rook on d1, shaping its 2023 counteroffensive and probing Zaporizhzhia lines. Russia shifted its queen to e5, digging in with trenches and minefields. Ukraine brought its queen to d4, striking Russian logistics at heavy cost. Russia captured the pawn on h2 with its queen, symbolizing Wagner-led assaults as Bakhmut fell in May 2023. Ukraine retreated its rook to h1, regrouping for future pushes. Russia withdrew its queen to d6, consolidating after Wagner infighting. Kherson reclaimed. Bakhmut lost. The war rages on. No fleet was safe anymore. Missiles, drones, and sabotage redrew the board. Ukraine advanced its rook to b6, retaking ground near Robotyne and intensifying strikes on Crimea. Russia moved its queen to a3, launching missile campaigns and overextending defenses. Ukraine captured the knight on f6 with its rook, crippling Russia's Black Sea fleet. Russia recaptured the rook with its g-pawn, sacrificing troops to hold the line. Ukraine captured the pawn on f6 with its queen, marking diplomatic victories with NATO and EU pledges. Russia repositioned its rook to a6, clinging to Wagner assets until the June 2023 mutiny. Ukraine checked the Russian king with its queen on g5, exchanging long-range strikes into 2024. Russia blocked with its rook on g6, defending depots and stalling breakthroughs. Ukraine captured the pawn on d5 with its queen, striking Belgorod, Kursk, and oil depots deep inside Russia. Russia developed its bishop to e6, maintaining entrenched fronts despite losses. Ukraine captured the pawn on b7 with its queen, escalating drone warfare and striking Moscow repeatedly. Russia countered by capturing the pawn on a2 with its queen, bombarding Odessa and Kiev. Ukraine shifted its queen to b5, consolidating Donbass defenses and securing Western support for 2025. Russia brought its rook to d8, locking in Donbass gains. Now the pieces slow. The tension rises. Every move risks everything. Ukraine moved its queen to h5, probing Russian defenses. Russia advanced pawn to h6, tightening internal control. Ukraine retreated its queen to h4, striking Crimea and targeting the Black Sea. Russia activated its rook on d2, hammering Odessa's ports and industries. Ukraine brought its rook to e1, preparing future offensives. Russia pushed pawn to a4, grinding forward around Avdiivka. Ukraine shifted its queen to f4, securing F-16 pledges and NATO integration. Russia moved its queen to b2, securing Iranian drones, Chinese trade, and artillery resupply. Ukraine placed its queen on g3, as by mid-2025, front lines froze into positional maneuvering. Russia moved its king to h7, stabilizing gains but lacking breakthroughs. Ukraine repositioned its queen back to f4, waiting patiently for the right strike. Russia advanced pawn to a3, pushing around Donetsk but at significant cost. Position as of August 20th, 2025. The battlefield remained dynamic yet fundamentally deadlocked. Ukraine held key positions but struggled to achieve a breakthrough. Russia maintained its occupied regions but suffered from mounting exhaustion. Neither side had claimed a decisive victory. A tense stalemate persisted. The next move remains uncertain and will be updated in a new video. And that concludes our first ever geopolitical chess report. This is just one way to view the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and we'd love to hear your take on the current state of play. What moves would you have made? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this unique perspective, please give the video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And if you don't want to miss our next reports, where we'll be breaking down the recent India-Pakistan war and the Iran-Israel war, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for joining us today.